Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's astrological report for September 2nd through September 8th of 2025. I hope you're all doing well. So this week we have a lot of astrology going on. There's a lot of major aspects, and plus we're building up to the main event, which is going to be the lunar eclipse in Pisces, exact on Sunday, September 7th. But before that, we do have a lot here to go through, and this includes Mercury has just changed signs today. Mercury's now ingress Virgo. Now, this is a great improvement for everything mercurial because Mercury is in its home sign and it's exalted in Virgo. However, with that said, Mercury has to adjust to all of the outer planets that have made these big sign changes this year. So it does get a little bit crazy this week at first. And that's because Mercury is in conjunct to Saturn, in conjunct to Neptune. It's going to square Uranus. That's exact by tomorrow, actually, on Wednesday. And Mercury will be in conjunct to Pluto. So again, a lot of adjustment that we have to make this next couple days with this dynamic change that's coming in. But overall, it's still a great position for Mercury, but it's also in eclipse territory. So it's going to be a part of what's going on with the eclipses. So we are entering wild card season, plus we have another dynamic that's showing some instability is possible, not only from Mercury square Uranus, and I'll talk more about the meaning of that, but we also have Uranus stationing retrograde. And that's going to be exact on Friday, September 5. However, I would look at Uranus stationary all week long. And that makes everything about Uranus more amplified and more in our face, which again can show some instability and some surprises. And that goes along with eclipse season already. So get ready. It's a little bit of a crazy week, but there is a saving grace to this eclipse that I'll be explaining in this report. So I think it's not just so much about the eclipse that's showing a crazy week. It's all these other aspects that are happening. Now, we do have Jupiter making a trine to the North Node of Destiny this week. It's exact on September 3, tomorrow on Wednesday, but it's in play all week long. So that just means fate and destiny is being expanded, is being highlighted this week in multiple ways. So that means things that are happening this week can have a long-term effect on the future. And we also have Mars making an in conjunction to the North Node of Destiny as well. So things that are happening also require us to make adjustments for our future. But also Mars is building up a square with Jupiter. That's going to be exact on September 4, Thursday. But it's building up, now all week long basically. And that's where things are a little bit over amplified. We have to make sure we're in the right gear and using our right energy levels. I'll talk more about that. And then, like I said, Uranus stationary plus Mercury square it can bring out some surprises and changes and a lot of volatility going on here. And then the eclipse on Sunday, September 7. And then things kind of start to smooth out after that. So this week, the moon is waxing through Capricorn, through Aquarius, and becomes full in Pisces and then gets eclipsed in the middle of Pisces. And then the moon will be waning through the end of Pisces and through Aries. All right, so that's what we have going on as far as aspects. And of course, you can find all this written out for you with the timestamps, and you can follow along throughout the week. Now, Venus here is kind of on its own. It's not being aspected this week. It is going to be making an in conjunction to the eclipse. So I'll talk more about that, but Venus is kind of on its own, and that represents relationship stuff here and financial things, including the market. However, Venus is in Leo being ruled by the sun in Virgo, and the sun is wrapped up in eclipse territory here and approaching the south node. So when it comes to the markets, personally, I'm looking at this time period of, I think mostly it's going to be the second half of September into the first week and a half of October, especially when Venus reaches Virgo. during that time. Again, the second half, the end of September and the first part of October before it ingresses Libra. But even now, I think for some of September, I'm just looking at this as because there's eclipses, because there's a lot of volatility going on, that's most likely going to affect the markets. The markets last week reached all-time highs again. So what I'm looking at is that there's a likelihood of some pullbacks, and that's kind of needed, and that's like a good thing. This isn't like a crisis thing or anything, but pullbacks are a good thing when you're looking at investing because that's when you buy. Obviously, you don't want to buy when it's at all-time highs. You want to wait for that pullback and then get it low because that's when you buy. And so that's what I plan on doing, is waiting for the best stocks, the well-established stocks to pull back and take advantage of that opportunity and then hold them for 6 months to a year and then get the profits when they go back up. So I do expect the market to have some volatility now, a lot more. And with that said, that can also create some big runs up and down, either shorting it or buying calls. But there's better opportunity, actually, with this kind of volatility that's coming up for, I'm pretty sure, most of September and the first part of October. But we'll have to see. But because Venus is kind of on its own over here, it may not be too bad. But I still think that there could be a pullback, and that's traditionally also what happens in September. But I think it's mostly going to be when Venus reaches Virgo. So with that said, that's what my plans are for anybody interested in how I'm looking at the markets. I do still see that there should be, a lot of good stuff around the economy. We saw that the economy grew 3.3%, more than expected. And I've been predicting that based on Jupiter and Saturn. Now that Saturn is back in Pisces, it's being ruled by Jupiter. And as Saturn backs up to 25 degrees, where it will station direct, Jupiter will reach 25 degrees of Cancer in a trine with Saturn. And Jupiter, Saturn typically show economical things happening, and they're coming into a trine aspect. So I do think that after we get past the eclipse of the volatility and we get into later in October into November, I think things are looking a lot better than a lot of people were predicting. So with that, I think I'll be going through the chart day by day. So let's get started here. On Tuesday, September 2nd, we start things off with the moon in Capricorn here. Moon has just ingressed Capricorn yesterday. It's going to be here all day long. So the moon in Capricorn is more of a serious moon phase for people. It's a little more drier, a little more heavy now, as the moon in Capricorn is being ruled by this Saturn, which is back at this critical degree of Pisces, backing up into old territory. And that's what I was talking about last week, how it's the beginning of this finalization process of the old so that we can really come into this new territory for 2026 and beyond. So what has to be taken care of the past. But with the moon here in Capricorn, it generally does talk about looking at goals, ambitions, work, responsibilities that need to be more mature and responsible and more punctual and just deal with all these more serious, mature things of life. But it does come back to things that are more private and behind the scenes that need to be taken care of perhaps this next day and a half or so, really most of this week, because even when the moon is in Aquarius, it's still going to be ruled by Saturn in Pisces here. And of course, Pisces is the main theme of the show this week, where there's going to be a lot highlighted that's normally very private and hidden from behind the scenes with the eclipse coming up. So it's a little bit heavy, maybe a little bit serious. Maybe some people could feel a little bit of pressure here this week with everything going on. But on the other hand, like I said, this Mercury ingressing Virgo is a big improvement for Mercury. That's also an improvement for the Sun, because the Sun in Virgo is being ruled by Mercury in Virgo. So that's helpful, I think, overall, to start being more grounded, to start being more practical and analytical and logical about things. And that's the balance that we're going to have to find here between intuition and feelings and emotional stuff versus being more practical and looking at things logically. So I'll talk more about that as we go through this week. But with the moon in Capricorn, It's adding to the earth energy of the more grounded, physical, material side of life in this process. But we still have those energetic things that we're picking up on from behind the scenes as well, generally speaking, of course. And like I said, today, Mercury, as it changed signs, Mercury is in conjunct to Saturn right before it changed signs, technically, but it's still within that in conjunction aspect to Saturn, and then also it is in conjunct to Neptune all day as well. So again, this is an aspect of irritation and adjustment that we're having to make with the way we're thinking and processing and communicating information to Saturn, the stuff, like I said, the important, serious stuff that still needs to be taken care of, or the pressure that we're feeling from behind the scenes, or private things that we need to look at. And this is also, Pisces and Virgo is the health axis. So this is about health for a lot of people. And I believe this is the beginning of a turning point for the better for a lot of people's health situation. Now, I don't think it's completely done for everybody. But with Mercury now in Virgo, this can be the beginning, I think, and a turning point for better news about health. Now, of course, this is very generalized. I can't get into every single person's exact details, with all the people around the world, but this is an improvement. However, this next couple days still could be a little bit, volatile with that. But still, it's about looking at health routine and health in general. But with this eclipse coming up, and like I said before, with Saturn backing up to Pisces, there's also a lot of other things that are affecting health. That is more energetic, more emotional, mental, spiritual, psychological. That's going to be highlighted for people to understand their health in a better way. That can improve physical health when we recognize the shadow about health. So that's actually going to be a part of the eclipse I'll talk about as well. So maybe adjusting, this turning point in some way about those types of things about health, and also work, how you're looking at your work and what needs to change about work. It's a turning point and adjustment about that stuff of what affects your daily life routine and your work routine from behind the scenes. What about bad habits and bad patterns or distractions or other things that are happening about work? And then the Neptune, we have to adjust to what is real, what is not real, reality itself and illusions and a lot of delusional things that the world is attached to. Some people's ideas about reality, it's pretty funky, that's been building up for years. So we also just have to adjust to where there's blind spots, where there's illusions and things like that. And then also dreams. What about the self? Do you have any personalized dreams or ambitions or things that inspire you that you would like to create and build, especially for the new era that's going to be fully coming in next year of 2026? Well, we have to look at the more practical side of life right now and kind of readjust our idea of our vision or our dreams for the future with this change of perspective or just the way we're thinking about things here as we come into this change of dynamic. It could also show, though, that we're trying to be more practical, getting down to the details, narrowing that focus now, but yet we still have a lot of distractions from other sources that we have to adjust to as well. All right, so that's how I'm seeing that for today. We also have the moon in conjunct to Venus today. Let me move this forward by the hour. So as the moon is building up through Capricorn, looks like this afternoon it forms that in conjunction to Venus. And so this is where the moon, the circumstances, the feelings, the mood is totally at odds with Venus. They can't help each other here. They're on two different pages. Venus, where the pleasure is, where the fun is, things that we enjoy and relationship stuff. It's kind of at odds with where the mood is, which is more serious. So Venus in Leo, that's like Leo vibes, sunny, bright, happy, wanting to have joy and fun. And the moon in Capricorn is more serious and all about work. So they're kind of clashing with each other today. So that just shows we have to adjust perhaps. It's like we have this work vibe or this serious vibe in the air, but we also are picking up on this other side that wants to enjoy something or have more fun about something today. So we're aware of it, but we can't necessarily be totally fulfilled in the best of ways with this dynamic. So adjusting between our feelings, needs, and our desires on two different pages. Now there is one nice aspect, one easy aspect today. As the day goes on here, right after the moon makes that in conjunction with Venus, it does align in a trine with the sun. So these are both earth signs. The inner and the outer are both in earth, more grounded, more practical, more about work, generally speaking, goals, ambitions. This is where things can generally flow more. This is this afternoon, this evening for some people, depending on where you live. It's only for a few hours, so it's not like the majority of all day long. Most of today has a lot of irritation and adjustments based on the aspects. But there's that moment here where the feelings are aligned with what we're focused on this afternoon. All right, I think things are still kind of getting a little bit crazy though, and there's a lot of unpredictability, volatility, and instability building up because of this Mercury building that square with Uranus as Uranus is beginning to station retrograde. Now that's Tuesday. Let's get to the next day here on Wednesday, September 3. We do have a lot of aspects going on, and this is the first aspect is this Mercury squaring Uranus. It's happening basically late on Tuesday, overnight hours into the early morning hours of Wednesday. I think it's relevant even today, all day on Tuesday and all day Wednesday, but because it's peaking in the early morning hours of Wednesday morning, there could be some stuff that happens in the overnight hours, perhaps that's surprising, or there can be, we're basically having to adjust. We're running into this dynamic of the future. Uranus and Gemini, this whole new era that's starting to show and come in, the way people are thinking, thinking about things, communications. It's like we're forced to look at this. We're forced to deal with a dynamic change of thinking and our mind and our plans and our future. Mercury wants to be grounded and detailed and practical about things, but we're also running into this little bit of this rebellious vibe, this alternative side of things. So we have to maybe be open-minded here to be thinking about things that maybe we weren't thinking about before, possibilities we never thought about before, thinking outside the box and being more innovative. But because it is a square aspect, it does come with a lot more tension in communications. So that could be surprise communications, can come out of the blue with something from somebody. That's very possible. It could also be not the best dynamic for traveling. Honestly, people need to be a little more cautious when traveling. Now, I think majority of people are probably going to be fine, but this can be on the global level. There could be some issues with transportation or traveling this next few days or even this whole week. I think that everything mercurial is kind of going through some volatility here this next couple of days. And there's so many aspects that are showing right here on this chart. It's kind of messy. It's kind of all over the place. Very changeable with what's happening here. This is a first quarter square, Mercury, Uranus. So it also comes back to when Mercury was conjunct Uranus, but that was a different sign. So this is like a first quarter of, okay, back when we were thinking alternatively or thinking about plans for the future of doing something different or new ideas. Now we're running into the challenge of how to make those ideas possible, how to act on those ideas and move forward with them. That's part of the issue in some cases. So just know that people could be it's a little bit strange this week. Even with the Pisces eclipse, it can bring out a lot of weird stuff. But this can also be people's communication could surprise you. The way that they're communicating and acting, or again, just surprise information or communications is possible. Some news and information that's a little bit unexpected and radical or surprising. So that's what I'm seeing. It's possible. A lot of volatility with this. I would think that, let's see, the sun, Venus in Leo, ruled by the sun. I mean, it could also affect the markets this next couple days as well with a lot more volatility. Okay, so that's the first aspect that's kind of setting the tone for the day. Thinking very differently as well. And then Mercury is in conjunct to Pluto, so there's actually this finger of God aspect from Neptune, Saturn, and Pluto pointing right towards Mercury here. I would say this next 24 hours or so, even today, tomorrow, something fateful, something really dynamic that's happening, that's shaping the future, something that's outside of our control that we have to adjust to. But this shows that the mind and communications is having to adjust to the group and the community that has a little bit of more of a rebellious vibe and an intense vibe. This could also affect friendships. Here we are trying to get the focus more narrowed, getting down to the details, and looking at work and other things that are important, but we're having this distraction or having to adjust to friends or group or community stuff or the politics or the world, of what's happening. So a little bit of an intense shadow vibe that we're picking up in multiple ways this week. So kind of intense mental energy, basically, in multiple ways here for the next few days. And then this is also when the moon is squaring Mars. So the moon here in Capricorn is squaring Mars and it's opposing Jupiter. So we see a big cardinal T-square here. And this kind of sets off this aspect of Mars squaring Jupiter as well. That's going to be exact the following day. So I think that it's really powerful all day Wednesday and all day Thursday with Mars square Jupiter, but the moon here is wrapped up into it by first thing in the morning on Wednesday. So this is likely showing some world stuff here, I would imagine. You're going to see some surprises, some news stuff coming out, some conflict is very possible. This could be on multiple levels. It could be Earth events as well, just general instability this week on different levels. But this also feels like it could be connected to military and or government things happening here with the moon in Capricorn. Squaring Mars, the planet of war and action. So there's a lot of emotional tension here and big energy that's getting amplified and over the top. People's drive or people's passion. Now, it's going to be a lot more tense because this Cancer side and this Mars and Libra side are not wanting to be overly aggressive. There's a need to it could be a lot more passive aggressive in this case too, but I think it's also showing in direct in a lot of cases for Wednesday. So check yourself, make sure you're in the right gear, make sure you're not pushing too hard or going over the top, doing too much. There could be a lot happening here. I think again, on the global level, there's some conflict potentially showing in the world. Some agitation for people, but it also is an aspect that shows people are driven to take action in some way, impulsively or emotionally, really wrapped up into this need to be doing something here. So it could also play out through work, relationships, and or home life stuff. So either family relationships, it could come through your work environment in some cases, and it does feel like it's connected to relationships. However, with Mars at the apex of this in Libra, ruled by Venus, Venus is not having any aspects to it. So again, it could be even a lot of internal pressure or agitation going on, whether it's directly connected to people or not, I still feel like there's a strong chance of some sort of surprise communication or information that adds to this level of tension going on here. But just know, be aware of other people. Even if you personally aren't affected by it, be aware of other people's emotional reaction and what they're going through and why they might be acting the way they are. Because there's so many different aspects all at the same time here. It looks a little bit crazy. So I think if you have personal planets roughly around 17, 18 degrees, you're going to be most affected by this 17, 18 in the cardinal sign. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn. You're affected by the T-square, but then if you have personal planets around 1 to 2 degrees or 0 to 2 degrees roughly, give or take, of the mutable signs, which is Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, then you could be wrapped up in this mental dynamic or this surprise communication dynamic in some way. And then Mars here is also building that in conjunction with the North Node of Destiny, but the moon opposite Jupiter here at the same time, again, is big energy, big mood, big feelings, big needs that could push people to try to get what they want in some way. It could be ambitious here, very ambitious in the short term for something, but it just feels like it's a little more of a conflict dynamic, honestly. So there might be some big development in the world with a military operation or military dynamic perhaps this week. Or Earth events, I suppose, could also be a part of it. There could also be isolated conflicts in different places around the world as well. All right, so with that, now the moon and Jupiter are also aligned with destiny and fate. It's a very fateful day for whatever is happening. It's going to affect the future. And that's where the moon here in Capricorn is sextile the North Node, trine the South Node, and Jupiter is trine the North Node and sextile the South Node as moon and Jupiter are in an aspect together of something culminating. Again, I think that there's some important dynamic happening in the world that's shaping the future. Again, will have this long-term effect. But just know on individual levels, whatever's happening here on Wednesday, generally it's pushing people into their future, whether they realize it or not. Things have ripple effects that will kind of play out about what's ahead for people. But also with, the Jupiter trine the North Node is pretty rare in this dynamic. So this could also affect home and family stuff and living situation, real estate stuff here about your future. There's a lot of stuff that's also behind the scenes of what we're dealing with on a more private level. It could also be something intuitive that comes out. It could be a feeling, of something energetically that people are picking up on that will have an effect on their future. But just know that fate and destiny is at play all day long. That's pushing people into something that is meant to be one way or the other. Now, the final aspect here on Wednesday, all this is actually happening super early in the morning. So there could be a lot of the overnight stuff, like I said, Tuesday late into early morning Wednesday, and then all this kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day, because the last aspect here is Moon squaring Chiron. Well, that's at 9:18 p.m. on the West Coast, so super late in other places, but the other aspects all happen from early morning all the way to 11:30 a.m. So afternoon, morning into afternoon has some of the biggest dynamics. And that last aspect of Moon squaring Chiron, again, that's some sensitivity, that's some wounds and some injuries, and I do feel like there was some sort of a conflict. I'd be very surprised if we're not seeing something happen here in the world tomorrow. So it can also be on personal levels, how we feel about the self, insecurities, wounds. It could literally be physical wounds or emotional stuff. That's more of a common aspect we deal with all the time. But I think it's connected to everything else going on here. So a little bit of some sensitivity for Wednesday night. All right, so that looks like a crazy day. Let's move forward here, and we get to Thursday on September 4. The moon is reaching the last degrees of Capricorn and approaching Pluto. So again, we're building up to a lot of this intensity. The moon is waxing, gaining light here. And it looks like on Thursday, we have a lot of aspects. The moon is sextile Saturn, and then the moon will change signs. So the moon does come into this minor grand trine of what's developing for the world that I've been talking about over and over every week. We see it right here that I'm pointing towards with Saturn and Neptune at the apex on the world point. I think there is some sort of world developments happening this week that's shaping the future. But now the moon comes into this dynamic that's in harmony with this minor grand trine of the outer planets and what is shaping up for the new world that's being built and structured. However, it's still intense because the moon is right next to Pluto, and it's going to be this dynamic change. Maybe things can begin to stabilize a little bit compared to Wednesday, but we still have a lot of this background tension. We still have Uranus stationary. We still have Mars squaring Jupiter. So it's not completely stable just yet, but I think moon sextile Saturn can really help us look at where we need to be responsible and mature about things. And then we get this mood change with moon ingressing Aquarius. So this will be the new phase for the next 2.5 days. Moon in Aquarius is more intellectual. Now it's all about air. It's actually, we kind of need some air here as well. Some objectiveness, some ability to detach from some of the strong emotions for a bit and look at things more logically. I think with Mercury there, that's helping as well. But it's also the beginning of a transformation phase as the moon approaches Pluto. It's intense, it's powerful, it deals with group and community. There's more energetics here about friends, power, control issues, shadow and undercurrents within community and friends and groups. And of course, politics is really strong here going on. So a little bit of this intensity that we're dealing with, and yet this shows that we're also in alignment with the future of especially what's coming for 2026, that we're getting a glimpse of here this last month or so with this new dynamic of the minor grand trine. So the moon reaches that, goes through that dynamic for the first part of the day, early morning hours. So when you wake up on Thursday, there's a mood change and circumstances could start to be a little bit different. But the moon sextiles Neptune and trines Uranus. So with the moon in Aquarius, people's emotions and feelings are changing, how they're reacting to things, and just, how people generally are reacting and their emotional level is just not, quote, normal. They're doing it in their own way. It's a little bit contrarian. People want more freedom and independence with this alignment to Neptune and Aries and the trine to Uranus. Thinking differently, feelings, and the way we're thinking more radically or outside the box or innovatively is more in alignment for the short period here. So it's much more communicative and social in this dynamic for Thursday. And then, the moon crosses over Pluto, so it's still very intense and transformative. And then there's nothing but hard aspects for the rest of the day, including Mars in conjunct to that North Node of Destiny. So the action, the drive, the passion is, we have to adjust, to everything that came out basically on Wednesday. Now on Thursday, we have to adjust our action plan for our future. Maybe there's some new surprises or new realizations that are starting to show up. Something came out perhaps for some people, not every single person will be affected in this way, but this is the background of the whole world of what's happening here. And so it requires us to make some sort of an adjustment for our future. based on what happened. And Moon in conjunct to Mercury. So the feelings are at odds with the thinking and the communication. Again, things are more radical, a lot more distractions, a lot more social, and yet the mind is still trying to get narrowing the focus and get to the details and work. And, so we have to like make this adjustment between the way we're thinking and the way we're feeling as the day goes on here on Thursday afternoon. All right. And the last aspect for Thursday is Mars squaring Jupiter. But again, that's building up all week. It's just perfecting here on Thursday afternoon, Thursday night. So again, this is big determination typically. It's a little bit, like I said, going over the top with things. A big drive, big feelings, big needs for something here. It could be a little bit extreme because the moon is next to Pluto, and that can show people's feelings and needs are very extreme. Plus, Jupiter's being ruled by this moon next to Pluto, and it's in this square with Mars. Mars being ruled by Venus is now beginning to be aspected finally, as this moon is going to be building an opposition with Venus. So this can be in relationships, home and family relationships. It could be talking about friendships or group and community type of relationships. That could be a little bit extreme or over the top. Again, this is where we have to make sure we're in the right gear and not overdoing it. It could still be a little bit passive because of Cancer and Libra square going on here, but I still think it's showing it's obvious of big energy, big tension. Again, I think there's big military potential here this week for something going on in some areas of the world. And yeah, and it's all like, whatever all this is, it's affecting the future in this fateful way that we're adjusting it to. So I think, again, if you have personal planets at 17, 18 degrees, you're really affected by this square in the cardinal signs, 18 specifically, 18 cardinal, Libra, Capricorn, Aries, or Cancer, and it could be a degree or so on either side, but 18 is the strongest. Then check yourself and make sure you're not being overly impulsive. This could also be, the background energy of the world has this sense of fighting for a cause, or even spiritual or religious causes could be activated this week, especially because of the Pisces eclipse. But this Mars square Jupiter is like fighting for a belief, a cause, something like that is possible. It could very well be Earth related too. It could be Earth events this week. I know there was an earthquake in Afghanistan already. There could be some more Earth conflict here, unfortunately, with homes and families, because Mars is squaring that with big energy in the homes and the family area. So it could play out on a variety of different levels in different places around the world. But also relationships. Just make sure, relationship doesn't get over the top. But something's beginning to culminate in some relationship stuff here with this moon building the opposition with Venus. So that's Thursday. Now let's get to the following day on Friday, September 5, and this is where the moon is opposite Venus first thing in the morning. So this is actually the overnight hours of Thursday into Friday morning. Depending on where you live, it'll be later in the morning for some people in Europe, perhaps. But, this is where the moon is as far away from Venus as it can get. So an opposition between feelings and needs and desires. But also, it's, again, some sort of a culmination about either financial things that went through some instability this week or relationship activity that should be really activated. People's needs are really passionate. This is a social dynamic overall. Aquarius and Leo can be very social here. of what's going on with a little bit of drama even. So needs and desires super activated early morning hours of Friday. And then for the rest of the day, there's a lot of inconjunctions, including the moon inconjunct the sun, moon inconjunct the south node, and moon inconjunct to Jupiter. So moon inconjunct to the sun, the moon, the feelings, the mood, the circumstances are at odds with where the focus is, which is more practical, health, work, service area versus group and community, friends, social activity. Two different pages between how we feel and what we're focused on. And then the moon in conjunct south node is having to adjust to, again, this Virgo side of the chart. What needs to be purged and purified and what needs to be worked on and taken care of versus what we feel like doing, freedom, independence, or social activity. Dealing with things of the past potentially. Moon in conjunct to Jupiter, having to also adjust to home, family, needs, inner world stuff versus outer world stuff here as the day goes on Friday. And again, all this is happening pretty early in the morning. And then there's a finger of God here between the south node, Jupiter, and the moon. The moon at the apex of this finger of God. So just for a couple hours here, again, something that's from a higher power, something that we're adjusting to, that's fateful perhaps, that's pointing towards group, community, friends, politics, and that social side of your life. That's happening. And then the moon trines Mars, and then Uranus is officially stationing retrograde. But again, because Uranus is stationing, it's also a lot of volatility, a lot of kind of instability is possible, especially with transportation, traveling, with media and social media and communications and group and community stuff. It's still connected to work stuff for some people because Uranus is ruled by Mercury in Virgo, work and health routine, things with pets in some cases, small animals, still a little bit of a crazy vibe in the air and unpredictability and volatility overall. But the moon aligned with Mars in a better way, there's this emotional connection to action, drive, passion, communication, strong communication with social activity and relationships. But still, that aspect of overdoing it as well in the background as possible. Still a lot of tension this week. All right, so that's Friday. And then we get to September 6th. On Saturday, the moon is at the last degrees of Aquarius at first. And we just have three aspects here on Saturday. And one is the moon sextile Chiron for the first aspect. That's where we can start to feel better about things, less sensitivity, more confidence, or just the ability to be helpful for some people that need to feel better, or healing aspects, or something in the world that's delivering something of help for wounded people or injured people or something. That's possible. And then the moon will change signs and we really begin this eclipse vibe as the moon ingresses Pisces, which is really first thing in the morning on Saturday. So when we wake up, the moon is in Pisces, a whole different energetic mood and feeling and circumstances begin. And this is the beginning of really strong eclipse energy. And it's a lot more sensitive and energetically sensitive and still a little bit crazy and volatile with the moon beginning to square Uranus. And that's the main aspect of the day as that moon makes that change into things that are more behind the scenes, squaring Uranus, a mood change of some kind here in the early morning hours of Saturday, which sets the tone for the rest of the day. And then this moon has a lot of light on it. It's beginning to be full. It's the peak emotional time of the month. Strong feelings, strong emotions are coming out for people. And it's the beginning of this process of really highlighting things that were hidden in private. So this can also be the beginning of a lot of scandalous activity being exposed, or conspiracies really be showing and being exposed or coming out, whether they're real or not, highlighted here in some cases. So a lot of things that, again, were more private and hidden begin to be lit up, but also will go through an eclipse of something will be eclipsed out based on what happens, this week and into next week. So this is also the beginning of, like I said, much more of an intuitive and sensitive phase for the moon. It's also the beginning of really strong other dimensional things. Eclipses are where the veils between worlds are very thin, and there can be a lot of paranormal kind of things that come out in some cases, or it could just be kind of crazy. Crazy vibes here, crazy energy, crazy feelings, crazy reactions. It's eclipse time with the full moon, so it's like this is really building up to things here. It's the collective being highlighted with all of its issues, psychological things coming out, mental stuff, emotional stuff that, again, is being highlighted so people can recognize a lot of the hidden stuff that's behind the scenes that's affecting daily life, work and routine and health life. So this is where people start to recognize some things that could possibly be affecting their health as well that need to be worked on. So this is also the beginning of this process of what we need to be prepared to let go of, what needs to end here in this area to be updated, because the North Node wants to make Pisces new again. Pisces has been going through so much for years, and this is the beginning of this finalization process now through next year for Pisces to be kind of fresh and ready for the next era of life without all the old stuff going on. So in a lot of cases, this is talking about old baggage that needs to be released and dealt with. So it's kind of all the very beginning of all that eclipse vibes, even though the eclipse is technically the following day. So again, the main aspect here is moon square Uranus, and then the moon building opposition to everything. And that's actually going to come in the following day with the eclipse on September 7. And this eclipse will be at 15 degrees. Let me just align this first. 15 degrees, 22 minutes. All right, that's where it is. So again, this eclipse will be the main event of the day, but we do have a lot of aspects, including before the eclipse is exact, the moon building opposition with Mercury. So again, it's this logical side of ourselves, practical, analytical, grounded, looking at things in a good state of mind, but also now we're picking up on things that the mind can't see as much. Now we're picking up intuitively on things here. So we have to find this balance between what we feel, the energetic things that we're picking up on, versus the practical, mental stuff that we're analyzing in some cases. So it's an opposition. It's the peak of emotional energy, like I said. And it's the shadow. This is a shadow event, exposing where the shadow is, exposing what was hidden and deep. Now, like I said on the thumbnail, there's a saving grace to this lunar eclipse. And that saving grace is the fact that the moon eclipsed in Pisces is being ruled by Jupiter in Cancer, and the moon in Jupiter in Cancer is being ruled by the moon in Pisces. So there's a mutual reception here between the moon and Jupiter, and they're in a trine aspect, and they're both wrapped around the North Node of Destiny. So Jupiter really helps out this eclipse to be better than it otherwise would be. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It's still an eclipse. It's still a shadow event, that exposes the deep side and energetic and psychological stuff and emotional and mental stuff and spiritual stuff. It's still like really strong emotional energy, but it also add something here that makes it easier for people to deal with, and even possible opportunity here. But with that said, you also need to keep any kind of dreams or opportunities that could appear. Make sure you keep your expectations in check so that you don't get disappointed if it doesn't have the full potential that you might think it does. Now, there's still some opportunity here that this eclipse could expose for people, and it really has this connection even more so about internal stuff, internal stuff about your own feelings, your emotions, your mental health, your emotional health, psychological, spiritual health, your home and your family environment, your living situation, and whatever is coming out here to be exposed and for you to see, it could have a positive effect on your future, because this will help you see something that you can then release, let go of, that's maybe been blocking you. With that said, Saturn is still here in this territory. There's still a weight, a pressure, a seriousness. But again, it's about looking at those things in a new light, seeing it in a new way so that you can really be honest with yourself and deal with it. So in some cases, this might just be more of a internal type of an eclipse, not necessarily literal new dynamic in your life. However, that next eclipse in Virgo, September 21st, could be more on a practical level of things in your life really showing results. But this is the beginning of something that allows the more practical side of life to change by seeing what's hidden and deep within. But again, the veils between worlds are thin. It's a little bit weird, and there's all this behind the scenes stuff going on here, and the moon is next to Saturn. There's a little bit of this darkness about it too. I just think that Jupiter mutual reception with the moon really makes this a lot better than it otherwise would be. So that's the saving grace. But we also see that Venus is really tightly in conjunct to this moon. So Venus isn't really helping this moon out, but not against it either. It's like we're aware of something down here about money, relationships, the pleasure side of life, our personal desires, but it's not really a part of this eclipse as much. We have to kind of adjust to what we're dealing with on more of this serious, heavy, energetic dynamic behind the scenes versus the more outward social relationship side of life. So it's not so much about relationships, in my opinion, or even financial things. This is more hidden things, again, that are being exposed and eclipsed out. So it's also fateful. Like I said, this is a fateful time, a karmic time that's going to have a long-term effect on the future, but it starts with what's within and hidden things. And on a global level, mundane level, again, it's bringing out things that people weren't aware of, that they didn't see before, that's going on in the world, or certain dynamics of conspiracies, of scandalous things that are being exposed. But it's also exposing the craziness of the world in a lot of situations, how the world is so crazy of what they believe is true and not true, and and it's trying to be worked out and with this eclipse. So it's a shadow event. You have to realize that it's exposing the shadow, the dark side, that then can be transformed into the light that brings more consciousness and awareness to people. So this eclipse at 15 degrees, 22 minutes, look in your chart. Do you have any personal planets at 15 degrees of Pisces? If you do, then you're definitely connected to this eclipse, and things will play out for you depending on what that planet is in your chart. But if you have anything at 15 degrees in the mutable, you're definitely wrapped up in the eclipse. If you have 15 Sagittarius, 15 Gemini, this is in more of a difficult way with your personal planet there. Whatever that planet is, it's more of a surprise or a shock or something that, adds a lot more tension to your life, that forces you to see something that you may not want to see or deal with. If you have the 15 Virgo, then, this is a big kind of wake-up call and a culmination point of something that's ready to change in your Virgo area of life. Again, this can also expose bad habits, bad patterns, what needs to change on this behind the scenes level. How do you live your life privately versus what you do out in the open? That affects your daily life and health and work. What needs to be let go of? This is about letting go of this Pisces side in the temporary to focus more on what's practical, what needs more logical and analytical attention and organization, and what needs to be cleaned up, basically. This will show you what's getting in the way of a cleaner, more practical life. Excuse me. So, that's a lot of how I'm seeing this. Now, this will be easier for people if you have 15 degrees of earth signs or water signs and more in flow. And again, this can have some sort of a positive effect on home and family dynamics after the tension and the realization is uncovered. Then there can be some sort of better support or growth and expansion for home or family or property and real estate things based on what is exposed that's been preventing something. But at the same time, because Saturn is here and Saturn's going to be here until February of 2026, whatever is exposed is the beginning of this next roughly 6-month time period of working on these things. So it may not just end instantly of whatever this is that's being exposed. It may take time. It may take now till February to finalize this area of the chart from the past and get rid of these hang-ups and these delusional things, these psychological things, these bad patterns and bad habits. And, what about your spiritual life? How is that affecting your real life and everyday life? What needs to change in your spiritual life? This could bring out religious things in the world as well. There could be some sort of spiritual, religious dynamics that are changing. That's being exposed in some way. So again, it's everything that's normally private and hidden that's coming out. All right, and again, it's wrapped up it's a North Node eclipse, so everything that's happening will shape the future for the long term. Now, there's one easy aspect, and that's that trine to Jupiter right after the eclipse and the mutual reception, which gives us support. We have the means to get through anything that comes up, even if there's a challenge here, and there will be for some people. Jupiter mutual reception gives us the faith, the hope, the ability to overcome the challenge and to have some sort of support on some level for whatever does need to be dealt with, and in some cases, this can lead to something positive. There can be positive surprises that come out that changes something for some people, especially if, again, you have more of the easier aspects from this eclipse. So, that trine to Jupiter. And then the moon is also in conjunct to Mars. So we also have to adjust to that Mars. And then that dynamic between Mars and Jupiter, this eclipse kind of brings that to a head. And then we're at a turning point for that strong energy that was over amplified all week long. It will slowly start to separate from that point forward. But we also have to adjust to things in our outer life and in relationships versus what's this deep and emotional, feeling-based vibe that we're dealing with behind the scenes. And our own world and people being pulled in their own world during this time. But then the moon is approaching Saturn, so it's still pretty heavy. It's still a weight and a burden that's being exposed, and there is something quite critical because Saturn is back at 29 degrees, of course. So the global world stuff, government stuff here, I think on a mundane level, is being exposed for things that are changing, that need to change in order to move forward and be dealt with from now until next year. And then it's talking on, the cultural level, politics type of stuff, and ideologies are being exposed and changed. And basically it comes back to this need to really end this long era that Pisces has been going through that's kind of changed the world since 2011, with Neptune in Pisces. Since 2011, 2012, everything in the world has gotten diluted and distorted in many different ways. And now Saturn's backing up to say, well, we're not done. We're not done with the past. We have to go back and finalize a lot of the old stuff that has affected the entire world. And so from now until next February-ish into March and April, we're finalizing, we're closing out a lot of the old stuff about the past. So this brings up boundary issues, both on the mundane level about countries, but your own personal boundaries too. Where do you need to tighten up the boundaries or loosen up the boundaries in some cases, depending on what dynamic you've been in with that? Have you been self-sabotaging? Have you been blocking your own ability to expand into new things and have doors open up for you? Have you been trapped in fear? Have you been too isolated or making yourself small, or have delusions that are blocking your ability to move into better life or better circumstances? Like, you have to look at all those psychological things that have been preventing healthier life. So on the global level, it's a lot about the messiness and the craziness that's been happening in the world. That's, again, has diluted and distorted a lot of things. So we're seeing those that say, okay, we're not quite done. We still have more work to do to end this old era that's still connected to the world, that's still connected to individuals, and all of that is going to be coming up with this eclipse to be dealt with. So that's what we see here with this eclipse. Again, it's wild card season, and the veils between worlds are thin and emotional and sensitive and heavy. And then we get to Monday, September 8th, and the moon is conjunct this Saturn. It's like this carryover from the eclipse to this heaviness, this weight, but the moon is about to change signs, and a new mood and a new dynamic will start to come in for Monday here in the afternoon hours. So the first part of Monday is still pretty heavy and serious and sensitive, and most of Monday, but the moon comes into Aries and shows, okay, there's this new phase now where the moon in Aries shows people want to be more independent, more active, more outward. And the moon is next to Neptune, the future, the dreams, what's inspiring people, looking at that in a new way, a new light. Are we being realistic? Are we being delusional about the future versus the past? So the moon aligns with this minor grand trine with all the outer planets in this new way. And we're looking at it, we feel it in some sort of a new way after the eclipse exposes things for us to see and feel. So big connections on the global stage here by next Monday of what's moving forward in new ways. And that's the majority of the day, is this minor grand trine that the moon activates. So the moon coming into Aries is now ruled by Mars in Libra, separating from that intensity from Jupiter, and the moon and Mars in Libra is ruled by Venus. So it puts more emphasis on self versus others, freedom, independence versus compromise and balance with other people, and just more about relationship activity and people's own freedom and independence really comes up for Monday. And that's the main aspect, and with the moon moving through all that for Monday on September 9 there. September 8, until we get to Tuesday on September 9. And that will be next week's report. So that's what I have for you. Hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great week ahead, and I hope the eclipse treats you right. Take good care.